Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our latest installment of our Ask the Broker series. Today, we are joined by Greg Lehrman. Greg is an expert in all things 1031 exchange. We've been working with him for almost a decade now, and he's helped a number of our clients facilitate 1031 exchanges. So, Greg, in our business, we deal with a wide variety of clients from an institutional level all the way down to a mom and pop owner operator. So if you would, please tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of give us a high level overview of what is a 1031 exchange.
Yeah, well, I was an attorney practicing law in the early 80s, and then I got a chance to get in the title business, and then I got a chance in 1994 to get in the 1031 business. And so I shifted back then, and for the last 29 years, I have focused exclusively on 1031s, which most people are stunned to find out have been around literally since 1921. Back when farmers went to Congress with a very simple concept. This is one of the simplest concepts compared to how complicated it sounds to most people. This is how basic it is. In 1921, farmers went to Congress and said, look, I can't sell a farm for more than I paid for it if I'm going to take all my money and buy a more expensive farm, because you need to show me how I can pay taxes with dirt. That's all this is. And Congress said, yeah, you can't pay taxes with dirt. So if we tax you in that situation, you're not going to sell anyway. And we, the U.S. government, aren't going to get any money anyway. So we want to unlock capital in real estate. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to sell and buy real estate. And in this case, it's not for flipping, not wholesaling. It's for people that buy and want to hold long term, and then they just want to, they have a big gain, but a lot of it's due to inflation. They just want to buy something else that's for business or investment. And the only way they can do it if they're not taxed, if they're spending all their money on the next property. That's how simple a 1031 is.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So I know here at Marcus and Millichap, we facilitate thousands of commercial real estate transactions every year. And 50% of those involve a 1031 exchange, where either the buyer is purchasing a property using 1031 exchange proceeds, or the seller is going to sell and then enter into a 1031 exchange. So, Greg, I'm curious to hear from you. What are kind of the most common types of exchanges that you see on a daily basis?
And when I practiced law, I had the same misconceptions. There's about 5 or 10 of them that everybody else has before they hear about it. I thought it was all commercial. As you said, it definitely is great for commercial. I didn't even think it applied to residential. It absolutely applies to residential, both from a legal and economic standpoint. It turns out that you can do this with all interest in real property anywhere in the United States that you're holding for use in a trade or business. So you can sell a residential rental and take that money, and now, since it's gone up in value, if you've held it a few years, you can buy 2. Then down the road, you can buy 4. And then you can buy multifamily. And so you're right. Earlier you mentioned it helps everybody. Every once in a while, Congress tries to take this away, thinking this is a loophole for the top 1%. No, it helps the young man or woman get just a leg up in just a regular, basic, not big fancy real estate business, just buying a rental and then buying another one. So, yeah, you see all kinds. And the most common now is a residential rental because of the volume. And I mentioned it qualifies legally since it's an interest in real property, held for investment, and it qualifies economically because all of the very best 1031 companies in the country that you're going to find are all going to charge just a little more than $1,000 for a regular exchange. So people that own one rental can even afford it. So that's why it is very useful for everybody. It is not just for the top 1%.
Okay. Now, I know that if you look across the broad spectrum of real estate, not just commercial, but obviously we're talking about single-family rentals as well, sales volume, transaction volume is down pretty significantly this year compared to 2021 and 2022 when we were kind of at the peak of the market. I'm curious to hear from you, how has your business fared this year, and what do you kind of predict for 2024?
Well, I've never been that great at the prediction business. Business is down, so we've all been through ups and downs. So I would say compared to the peak, yeah, it's probably down, from as a company. Well, personally, I was doing 60, 70, 80, and my highest a couple of years ago, I personally did 99 exchanges in 1 month. 99.
Wow.
And now you're talking about around 30 a month,
Okay.
which is still good. So yeah, it's still fine, but it's definitely slowed down. That's how it affected the overall business. And then the market brought on a type of exchange that nobody in the 1031 business ever thought they would see when it was at the peak. 1031s, even though they're for all kinds of properties, they're not for flips. So the number one question we get is, well, what do you mean? What's the difference between flipping and holding? Because they're for properties you buy to hold. What's weird is even though the code says you can do this only for properties you buy to hold, it actually never defines the word held. So to show you bought it to hold, it's a matter of intent. So in any kind of normal market, at all normal, it's hard to show you bought it to hold it if you sell it short of 2 years that you've owned it. So the rough rule of thumb has always been hold it at least 1 year, and if you've held it 2 years or longer, that's considered conservative enough in a regular market. But what we all saw like crazy was people buying properties to hold. So the key is they didn't buy it to flip. They didn't come to y'all the day after they bought it and said, hey, I got a great deal. I bet y'all can sell it for a lot more than I paid for it. So they can't come to you the day after they buy it and say, will you list this? But they can buy and hold. And 3 months later, if someone wants to come along and give them an unsolicited offer for a lot more, they can take it. So the word held, which is a key word, is all about intent. All the facts and circumstances are relevant. It's not black and white. So that's one of the many reasons why you got to call someone that only focuses on 1031s if you want to get the full answer. CPAs are busy. I would hate to try to do everything they do. The tax code is 6 times as big as the King James Version of the Bible. So a lot of CPAs kind of think, I don't think you could do it. I don't think you can do this. You haven't held it 2 years. That's just, they're used to rules of thumb. But we know the nuances. And so that's how it's affected our business is we had more short holding 1031s than anybody ever imagined. And now, of course, you don't have that. And it's a slower market. But thank goodness I'm still here. I'm still eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Greg, at a high level, what requirements need to be present in order for somebody to qualify to capitalize on a 1031 exchange tax deferral?
They need to have the intent. There's very few words. They just need they need to know 2 words. They need to know what does like kind mean and what does exchange mean.
Right.
And as y'all know, as brokers, you have the 1031 expert answer those questions for them. To set up a 1031, all it takes at a minimum is for your client to have at least one conversation with a 1031 specialist and the contract and the title commitment. And but again, getting back to whether it qualifies or not, that conversation, they need to have held, they needed to have the intent to hold and held an interest in real property anywhere in the country, this business or investment, and then they can sell it to whoever they want. And then the only thing that makes it an exchange is that you've gotten our documents at the closing. So you absolutely, as y'all know, you have to have 1031 documents at a closing. So you can do it. You can sell any investment real estate or business in the country, but you can't do that in a way that gives you either actual or receipt of your funds. It's kind of like a retirement account roller. Yeah,
I view the accommodator's role or as a facilitator of sorts, much in the same way the title company is.
Right.
It's really synonymous. It's almost the same role, just in a different part of the transaction. But we can't go and close a deal somewhere else other than with the title company.
Right.
Right. I can't really facilitate the 1031 exchange without the presence of an accommodator such as yourself. Right. It has to be formally in place. Can somebody who's selling some real estate and they're getting into a like-kind property, it has to be of equal or greater value than the previous one that they sold, correct? And does that apply to both the debt and the equity pieces of the total value?
It depends on if they want to defer all the tax or some of it. So to defer all the tax, you just take the sales price off the top. And then if there's debt, that's paid off, obviously. and then we hold the money. And all a fully deferred exchange is they reinvest all of their equity that we're holding, if it's all that they had, and they replace their debt either with new debt or additional capital. Some people think they have to maintain the same loan to value on the next property. It's just absolute terms. It's just absolute terms.
Oh, interesting.
How much was your equity?
Sure.
You got to spend all that. How much was your debt? You got to replace that either with more debt or your own cash. But a lot of people, as you know, move up. So it doesn't matter the percentages. Once you move up and reinvest all your equity, you've deferred all of the taxes. But that formula for deferring all of the tax has messed up so many people into thinking that that's all you can do. I hear that all the time, that you absolutely have to move up. No, that's just a real simple way for saying what you need to do to defer all the taxes is, if you move up and not touch any of your cash, you will defer all the taxes. But number one, you can take out closing costs. Number two, you can buy less. However, as y'all know, any amount you buy less is what they call boot, and it's taxable unless they have other write-offs. So most of my surprises for people, which are the same surprises to me when I got in the business, are positive, like how broad like kind is, and the fact that exchange doesn't mean you got to find somebody to swap with.
Sure.
A few negatives, I could say a few things that get under people's skin and almost argue with me like I'm the one that set the rules, is that they can't, by gosh, put their cost back in their pocket.
Right.
They're selling something for $2 million and they want to buy something for $1.5 million, and they only paid $500,000, and I tell them, well, that's taxable, and they go, no, that $500,000, that was my money. I put $500,000 back. You mean I'm taxed on what I put in? You're not taxed on your costs, but your cost has to go with you if you're not paying taxes.
Right.
So the whole point of that farmer example, the reason we got this in the code was if you're spending all your money, there's nothing to pay taxes with. So if you want to pull out some money, that's a regular sale, that part of it. So that's why that's taxed. Any money you pull out comes out of profit, not your cost.
You mean that somebody's trying to have their cake and eat it too? I'm
Yeah.
so surprised.
I
It's
know,
amazing, right?
Exactly.
So,
Right.
so tell us about the timelines, right? We know that there's timelines,
Right.
and so we have to go to a like kind property, which is extremely broad,
Extremely broad.
right? Which is great.
Yeah.
You've got some flexibility in terms of the value of the real estate and exactly what has to be replaced, and some nuance there. Tell us about the nuances in terms of a timeline that we have to hit.
Now, there are nuances with held. There are no nuances with the timing. Without a
That's black and white.
It's black and white.
Right. Got it.
Yeah,
got it.
it's
Well, what are the
black-
specifics?
Yeah,
then?
the
Right.
specifics. It's hard and fast,
Yeah,
as you know.
right.
The key, there's some things I want to repeat because there's just a few of the things that are most important. And the key is first, of course, to get the timelines, it starts with the closing of the sale. And I want to emphasize, even if it's the fourth time I've said this, that the sale needs to have exchange documents there.
Right.
Because earlier I said you can't have access to the money, and I want to add to that, elaborate. Not only can you not have actual receipt of the money, some people think the fact that you can't get the money means all you got to do is not get the money. You could just leave it at the title company with no documents.
Oh.
But once it closes in your name, if you don't also have our documents, that's called constructive receipt. It's as though you've received it. It's your money. So just repeating again,
Okay.
you got a sale. You got a sale with exchange documents. Someone like us is holding your proceeds, just kind of like a retirement account rollover. And as y'all know, they only have 45 days to identify a group of properties they're considering. They don't have to buy everything they're considering, but they can't buy anything they're not considering. And by considering, it's filling out just a real simple form that we do. Believe it or not, actually, the tax code doesn't even have an identification form, but it sure does tell you you got to identify. They give you some options, and so we've done a form where we list out their options, and it's a fill in the blank form. They put down the properties. They don't have to have the most current survey. It's an address, even a commercial deal, or it can be the building up the corner of 3rd and Throckmorton, and if it's acreage, a lot of times it's about 204 acres at Farm to Market Road, something.
Right.
But it has to be real. And many people who know quite a bit about 1031s, but maybe not everything, are very familiar with the 3 property rule, so we can talk about that. Most common way of identifying.
Please do.
That's only one way.
Okay.
Yeah, if you pick the 3 property rule, if you only list 3 choices, then they can be of unlimited value. So let's say you only want 1 property, but if you have 2 backups, you might throw them on there. And then once you can switch during those first 45 days, but after that you can't switch at all.
Switching in the sense that if you're going to if you're going to consummate the transaction, it's going to have to be with one of those 3 that you picked earlier.
Right.
Can't after 45 days. After the 45-day period is come and gone, how much time do you have to close the deal at that point?
Another 135.
Okay, so 180 start to finish.
Right. You can
6
say
months.
sometimes the way it rolls off even my tongue, it can be misconstrued. You know, it's common in the business to say you have 45 days to identify and 180 to close.
Right.
When we say "and," we mean there's 2 requirements, but we don't mean 45 plus.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What else other than the 3 property alternative? What's an alternative?
There's 2 more. One of them's good. One of them is not. So you really almost never hear about the 3rd rule, and that's not bad that you don't hear about it. It's not considered wise to follow it, but the one that's good in a lot of cases is the 200% rule. If someone's buying maybe they're identifying a lot of different smaller properties, maybe, or if they're buying oil and gas interests, which is the biggest surprise to
Oil and gas will apply to the term like kind.
Exactly.
Interesting.
One guy said like kind means if you like that kind, buy it.
There you go. Yeah. Right.
So you can buy whoever owns this office building, they literally can sell this and buy royalties from the Permian Basin, which over time, people hear oil and gas, they think risky drilling programs. And even the operators will tell you drilling programs are risky, even though not as risky now as they used to. But they still say, the good ones say, don't give me any money you can't lose on drilling. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about buying the royalties off the wells. You know, you see those commercials where people have they've gotten a judgment against somebody and they have a payout. And they say, it's my money, I want it now. There's tons of people that have royalties coming in. They would rather sell them at a discounted net present value. Or some people, they leave royalties to a charity in their will, and the charity doesn't want them. So they will sell them they'll sell those income streams. And those income streams qualify. They're like kind of this building. You're buying, it's the royalties. It's like buying income off of buildings where you have no legal liability. You have no liability for any more expenses. But it's even better than that, because it would be like not only buying the income off of buildings, but you take a whole piece of land bigger than what that building is on, but the same tract. You know, you get paid every time a building is added to that property. When you buy royalties, you're buying the landowner's interest, so you start getting checks from the oil wells that the landowner had been getting paid on, and any future well built on that property, you get that for free. So that's why it's not near as risky as it sounds with oil and gas. But when we're getting to the 200% rule is what it is. The second thing is the 200% rule. So if you want to list more than 3 choices, you can do that as long as you add up all of the values. That's a little nuanced. The values of what you're identifying, it can't be more than double your gross sales price.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got a question. Going back to like-kind exchange and how broad of a term that is, you kind of surprised me when you're talking about oil and gas interest, because, you know, in our world, commercial real estate, I think you can sell a storage facility, you can buy rental properties, you can buy multifamily, you can buy a hotel, whatever it is. One question that I get asked quite often, well, 2 questions. Can I buy land? Sometimes it's, can I buy land and then go develop it? Or can I buy, you know, ranch land, farmland? So how does that work? I assume yes with the farmland, because that's how it was originated.
Right, that's easier. I have to ask more questions on the other one. Oh yeah, you can sell anything that qualifies, and you can buy farmland with 2 or 3 caveats. It does qualify. It's considered like kind, but there's kind of a hidden caveat. Even though the tax code says improved real estate held for investment is like kind to unimproved real estate to be held for investment. Over in another section of the code, it's going to say, but you've been taking depreciation write-offs on these improvements, and there's no improvements to depreciate on this land, farmland. So you will have to, what they call recapture depreciation. You'll have to pay taxes on any depreciation you've taken, but not on the appreciation. So it all depends on, usually that's still a good enough savings. Like I sold a $300,000 rental. Well, I bought it years ago at a foreclosure for $60,000, and part of that was the land value. So the depreciation was only, on 40 something thousand, and it was just a percentage of that. So to sell a $300,000 building and pay like $6,000 tax depreciation recapture gives you an example. It's still a good deal, but it's something you need to know about. It's called like kind, but the depreciation doesn't work. Oh, also, if you want to buy a farm, if you're going to move there, you've got to treat like a part of it. If you're going to move there right away, then a part of it, it may just be 1%. It's case by case, doesn't qualify, but you can do that. It's really neat. I love those. They're called split treatment transactions. So anytime you know anybody that bought land years ago and they live on it, and it used to be way out of town, and now the town has come up against them, and now they're the next piece to be developed, and it's worth millions. I know y'all have seen that so many times. I have. And they live on acreage. Well, if it's a married couple, they have to just do a rough, it is nuanced. This is nuanced. They have to just use judgment to allocate the sales price for that whole property between their, in Texas, everybody calls it a homestead. The tax code calls it primary residence. There's no guidance on this. You just have to be reasonable. And then they put the amount of the sales price that they think is fair to put on their home in the bank. And if they're married and their gain on that part is $500,000 or less, then all that money is tax free. Then they can 1031 the rest. About half the people I see in that situation, they'll go buy another piece like it, 100 more miles out of town. That's 30 times bigger. Mm-hmm. The other half, they take the money for the land and they put it into what I call mailbox money. I had an 86-year-old farmer the other day. He had bought land 60 years ago north of Austin, and now there's the development. 86 years old, still on the tractor.
Did that qualify for long-term hold?
Yeah, really. Yeah. There wasn't a question on where it held. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was still farming, and the developer offers him $6 million. And he gets to quit working, paid no taxes on $6 million. He put $3 million into a DST, which we can get into, and that's paying him 5%. He's making $150,000 a year off of the DST. He put $3 million into the oil and gas royalties that are paying him 15%, $450,000 a year. He never made $100,000 in his life. He's making $600,000 doing nothing. He could get totally where he can't work anymore, and he gets that. That is not even what he was most excited about. He had been worried for decades about leaving his only piece of property to 5 kids that didn't get along, and some of them were responsible, some weren't, and none of them knew what to do with the farm. And now he's leaving all 5 of them. They just get 20% of his DSTs, which again, I know we need to explain, and 20% of the royalties. They're going to each get 1/5 of $600,000 a year doing nothing, and with a stepped-up basis, as y'all know. You just keep selling and buying real estate your whole life, and then the way to maximize the benefit is just to go ahead and die.
Well, we can identify with that story in some ways, because oftentimes we have owners of real estate who will have children, grandchildren, and as specialists who focus specifically on the self-storage business, that's not something you can just cut up with a knife. Right?
Exactly.
So you have to have some kind of plan in place. Oftentimes that plan, or sometimes at least, can be to sell it and then distribute the value of the real estate after that's been sold. And so that's where we come in. Let's talk about how much that's worth. Let's talk about what's going on in the self-storage market. We are specialists for that very purpose.
Yes.
And the reason that we were interested in having you in here is because we as brokers have to know a few things about a lot of different subjects, but we're not experts in all of them.
Yeah.
And by no means do we want to be. You, on the other hand, in the 1031 exchange discussion, you are 100% an expert, where we can paint the broad strokes, you can fill in the fine print.
Right.
So we appreciate you doing it for us. here today. What within the self-storage industry, have you seen anything that has been unique to you compared to other asset classes, with people doing more transactions, less, more that are 1031, interested in 1031, or is it just more or less all part of the same trend?
It's all part of the same
Yep.
trend, it seems to me. And I'm not an expert on that simply because I keep my nose to the grindstone.
Right.
I just answer my questions, and I don't. I just don't pull up data and remind myself, oh yeah, I had this kind of deal. This is how many of these I had. I know we've had those, a lot. And I had one in Waco, which was it wasn't limited to the storage business, but it is one of my best examples of the word held, of how to do the word held. This guy had always bought self-storage and always held them. And he bought one, I think it's 2 years ago in Waco, like in a November of a year. And I mean, a month later, he got an unsolicited offer for more than he paid for it. Now, this is about the best situation I've ever seen for qualifying for short-term. I mean, for a short-term holding, but proved it was held.
Right.
Guess what? The first thing the seller told him was, "This is not for sale." So he turned down that offer. So he didn't have it on the market. He gets an unsolicited offer. Not only was it unsolicited, so that's great. He actually could have taken it and done a 1031.
Right.
But on top of everything else, he said, "No, this isn't for sale." And in January, the guy makes him a better offer. And in February, it's too good to be true.
Right.
So yeah, so I've had a lot of self-storage, but I can't tell
There's
you
not
yeah.
Right. That's okay.
Yeah.
That we understand that. And
Yeah.
one of the things about Texas that we're very familiar with here, and we kind of have to speak this language in order it's just the nature of the landscape. But the like-kind exchange, we were using the example of oil and gas royalties and things like that. It's very, very familiar to those who live in Texas, but maybe not so familiar to those who are outside of the state.
Right.
Right. And a lot of our clients do indeed live outside of the state, may not be as intimately familiar with the oil and gas business as we are. What are some other examples of like-kind exchange that can qualify but wouldn't necessarily be logical to assume, like oil and gas or something else?
Well, one thing I want to forget, a lot of times people go back to a prior question. When you mentioned land for development, I want to be clear about that. Well, first of all, of course, you can buy land if you're going to sit on it for a few years. But if you're buying it to develop, what I want to answer is that the reason it would involves more questions, because if you're buying it to develop for resale, it doesn't qualify. Just as a regular, that's a dealer. But if you're buying a property to develop to rent out a couple of years, it does. So I want to hit that.
Okay.
Well, the DST, as y'all are familiar with,
Delaware Statutory Trust.
It stands for Delaware Statutory Trust. It's just a fancy word for, well, first let's back up and kind of get to another piece of bad news that segues into this, why these are a product. Another probably one of my top 5 pieces of bad news is, even though the types of real estate that qualify is very broad, you have to get a direct interest in the real estate, as y'all know. And therefore, can you invest in a partnership? No. So a bunch of apartment deals just don't work for investors. So many of them are limited partnerships. When you invest in a partnership, even though the partnership owns real estate, the tax code says, well, you don't own real estate. you own interest in a partnership, and they specifically are excluded. So I want to cover that. To get back to, you got to get a direct interest. Well, just happens to be something called a Delaware Statutory Trust, and just to cover all that matters is they're set up in a way that does qualify. They look like limited partnerships, but the fact is they qualify and limited partnerships don't. But that's the big picture. It's just a method for people investing fractional interest. Examples are the ESPN World Headquarters is a DST. The Academy Sports and Outdoors headquarters in Katy, Texas, just outside of Houston, Texas, is a DST. Many Amazon warehouses are DSTs. My wife and I own a piece of a Amazon warehouse in Tucson, Arizona. So most people are not interested in DSTs. In fact, myself, I would have invested in oil and gas. My wife didn't have time to study it. Oil and gas sounds riskier, and so that's why I own one. But sold a $300,000 rental, little old duplex in North Richland Hills, Texas, out in DFW. And we didn't need to be taking those phone calls anymore. It's not enough to pay somebody to manage it, and we're definitely too busy. So, and that was so much money for that duplex when you figure the property taxes and what you can rent it for. So that accomplished our goals. Take the 300 grand that it was more than we needed to get rid of it, and we put it in an Amazon warehouse. And those don't pay that much, but we don't have to do anything. In fact, we did a 0 coupon. All of Amazon's rent goes to pay the mortgage. So ours is just long-term equity,
Right.
where we just forget about it. But if you want monthly cash flow, you can
do
get
it to
that
that.
like 4%.
Right.
I don't want to quote rates, of course, especially since markets change. And you buy those through a registered investment advisor. But that's what a DST is. So if you want mailbox money, if you want to turn land into more income, or you want to get out of the tenant business, you can go into 3 forms of mailbox money. One, I know y'all specialize in, of course, triple net lease properties, obviously you also
Sure.
know a lot of people don't know what those are. So for the audience, just where you lease to net of maintenance, taxes, and insurance swap. Most of the Walgreens and CVS's
Sure.
are standalone, anything with dollar in it,
Yep.
standalone.
You bet.
So most of those, would you say, are owned by older 1031 investors who've never been there?
A lot of them are.
A lot of them.
A lot of them are.
Yeah. So people can do that, of course, but you got to have quite a bit of money. Most of them are a few million.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
The lowest one that I ever noticed, the smallest price I noticed on a triple net was actually under $1 million. It was a Jack in the Box by a mall outside in Fort Worth, Northeast Mall. Anyway, so that's for people that want to buy a whole building. DSTs are for people that don't have that much money, because they can buy a triple net lease. They're buying a piece of a triple net. That's all it is. A
Right.
DST is buying a piece of a triple net lease.
Right.
And or oil and gas royalties. Those are really the 3. I would say a fourth that's, I would say, not as much mailbox money, but you do have companies building these brand new homes for rentals, on mass scale.
Right.
You got a brand new home that shouldn't need to be fixed up for, repaired for a while, and maybe have property managers.
Did the government always have such an accommodative interpretation of what constituted like kind, or did this evolve over time?
Really, I've been in this business 29 years. I've always heard people say, well, it used to be more restrictive. I've never seen it in the history. I've never had any 1031 expert say that used to be more restrictive.
Okay.
So I just think it's people learning how broad it is. I bet you for a while there were no cases, and so it was vague, and so people were more
Right.
conservative. What totally changed was it was more restrictive on the format. From 1921 until 1991, the word exchange actually meant something. It actually meant you had to go exchange with somebody. So you could only do it if 2 people wanted each other's properties. Or the most creative you could get back before 91 is if you wanted my property and the odds are 99%, you're not going to have what I want. If I decide I want his property, I would have to convince you to buy his property and then swap. You had to jump through all those hoops until 91. And in 91 is when they made it easier, where to me they should have used a different word, because you're not exchanging, you're just doing a retirement account rollover, but you have to have our documents that call it an exchange. That's what changed the biggest.
I did not know that at all. I
Okay.
had no understanding that you literally had to swap it.
Yes.
In order to qualify. That's really, if I knew that, I had long since forgotten it. That's really interesting. To
Yeah.
what extent is the government in today's 2023, 2024 climate? You mentioned earlier that there's been some rumblings about closing loopholes for the 1% and the people sitting in their ivory towers benefiting from all of this, when in reality that's not how it actually impacts people in the real world. But is there a movement right now to try to kind of close some of these, make it more restrictive?
I guess the best way I could put that is it's not right now on the front burner. It's so sometimes, as y'all know, it gets on the front burner.
Right.
On the other hand, I can't say, oh no, there's no movement from anybody, but it's very much on the back burner. Joe Biden had said even before he was president what he was going to do. He was proposing to limit the amount of gain you could defer each year to just 500,000, and that didn't go anywhere. Believe it or not, this sounds like something that a lot of people would think only the Democrats would do, to get the top 1% to distribute income. Believe it or not, for 2 years we had we were butting heads with Paul Ryan. So both parties actually go after it for different reasons. But the chairman of Ways and Means at the time told me to my face that they were going to take away 1031s totally, because Paul Ryan's sole focus was lowering corporate rates. And so there's this idea really among both parties, just from a practical standpoint, if you lower one rate, what do they call it? Pay for it. You got to come up with some pay for it.
Right.
So you got to get it somewhere else. So
right.
Paul Ryan, his sole focus was so much on lowering corporate rates that he almost didn't care. And I know that's overstatement, especially emotional. He didn't want to take stuff.
Right.
But he almost was just like, he was so laser focused that, okay, we got to find other things to pay for this. And he thought, initially, both parties think if you take this away, it's going to produce revenue. It's pretty easy. It's not easy in terms of time and effort and money going to all of their campaign events, which you have to write checks. That's why you got to keep contributing to your PACs and all that, because we have to every few years, all of us in the industry have to go, and this part is easy. The facts are easy. It's just that you got to do it for 2 years and spend money and time away from your job to keep your job. It's easy to show that you take this away, you cut down on sales, you lower GDP, you kill jobs. Every 1031 makes money for real estate brokers when they're using a broker, title companies, probably 99% of the time. There's less than 1% of the time people are crazy enough not to use a title company. So real estate brokers, me as a 1031 attorney, title company pays the highest rates. So it's in the code to generate business for people that pay the highest rates. So it's so easy from a factual standpoint to show it's counterproductive for either a Republican or a Democrat to vote to take this away or limit it, because both parties want to show that they're good for the economy.
Education has something to do with it, just helping people understand this is what it is, this is its purpose, and this is who it helps.
Right.
We have a real estate market, and this is true in self-storage. Roughly 80% of all of the investment real estate, income-producing commercial real estate in the United States is owned by private capital. It's non-institutional in its nature.
Okay. Yeah.
Mom and pop. It could be mom and pops. Could be a group of investors. Country club money. Could be a private equity company. But either way, it's classified as non-institutional in its nature. And when you think about it that way, by definition, the majority of the people that are helped, that benefit from the existence of a 1031 exchange opportunity, are the very people that do not sit in, or a large portion of them don't sit in some ivory tower. They aren't necessarily the 1%. They are the exact opposite, who have worked their way up and accomplished something and now want to be able to unlock that capital and reap the benefits of it. It's a great thing for real estate investors, and so it's important for us to help educate our clientele, because we are certainly not the experts either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, another example, this young man wanted to invest in real estate. I got to know him at a just down-to-earth residential real estate investment club, and the first house he bought, his intention was to fix it up and rent it. That's the key. It's not for fix and flips. It is for fix and rent. And he got a hard money loan that enabled him to really increase the value. But I know he was telling the truth, that his intent was to rent it. And guess what? He was like 22 years old or something. He couldn't at the time get permanent financing. So you talk about helping the little guy. I mean, this is a young guy trying to get in the business. And the only reason he did a 1031 is he couldn't get permanent financing. And so he got to sell it for more than he paid for it. and buy something else. And over time, I bet that guy has built up a decent but not a ridiculous, portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And it enabled him to sell that but not pay taxes when he was just trying to buy a rental.
Tell us about how long you can keep going. Is there a limit? Can I go and what are the implications on my heirs if I haven't yet
That's the thing. It's your heirs benefit the most.
Right.
There's every industry has little phrases, and ours for that is you can swap till you drop.
Right.
You can swap till you drop, and so because some people say, well, you're just kicking the can down the road, or you're just deferring it, you're just putting off the inevitable. It's usually better to take your pain now. A lot of times it is, but not for this, because while you're alive, you benefit, because if you're not paying taxes, you're buying more real estate, pays you more income your whole life. You only pay taxes if you decided to get out of every form of real estate that qualifies. Even then, it's at future cheaper dollars at 0% interest. So why do you benefit from kicking the can down the road? Because of all the additional real estate you buy, pays you more income. So, and then if you pay taxes, you're in charge. It's like an interest-free loan from the government, if you want to pretend you would have owed it now, with no term. You're in charge of any due date on that loan, and that is if you just want to get out of real estate so much that you're not even going to put it in this easy money, this triple net or DST or oil and gas. So you do make more money by not paying taxes. Let's say, let's take a residential guy. Let's say his taxes on his first house, his income taxes, capital gains would have just been 25 grand. What if he's putting 25% down? The next property, every 25 grand he adds to his down payment adds 100 grand
Sure.
to what he can buy. So just look at how that helps the real estate business. And so yeah, you benefit while you're alive, and if you do it your whole life, then when you die under current law, that's another thing they go after, but you can only base your operations on current law. Your heirs get a step up in basis. The capital gains goes away. There are a lot of ways of putting it, but the heirs get a step up in basis, meaning they get to actually pretend they wrote a check for the property that they inherited at what it's worth when they inherit it. So that 86-year-old farmer, his heirs get monthly cash. They don't have to know anything, and they don't have to pay any taxes on the value of that. They'll pay ordinary income on their monthly checks. So that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, you want. Some people say, well, I had one person that, there was some oil and gas royalties that were out there for a really good return, and somebody told them, don't do that. That's going to put you in a higher tax bracket. No, you want to be in the highest tax bracket, if that's how you made your money.
Sure. Sure.
There's not a 100% tax
Right.
bracket.
Right. What would you advise people who are thinking about a 1031 exchange as a potential strategic course for them? How would you advise that they go about learning the ropes, or at least understanding what the appropriate strategy is for them? Is it to give you a phone call first? You get on the horn, and we just start from the basics and go from there. But how does it usually work?
Well, one thing that's exactly like you guys and the title companies is none of us charge for our time. Maybe y'all have some consulting agreements, but just under the common real estate commission. Of course, we all just get paid if it closes. So there's never not a reason to call a 1031 expert.
Right.
I'm an attorney, but I'm not their attorney.
Sure.
I'm an attorney who specializes in 1031s, which means I'm actually an independent trustee but I'm allowed to answer everything that's black and white, and even what's nuanced. I tell them it's nuanced.
Sure.
And I say, this is a fact issue. Here's the good and bad facts, and now you get with your CPA and decide whether they're willing to sign a tax return with those facts. So you call a 1031 expert early and often. I say there's an intangible time and a tangible time and a drop dead time. The intangible time is anytime you have a question. The tangible time is if you've signed a contract, because that really starts the process. And then the drop dead is you better call us before it closes.
Right.
Yeah, we have... and my employees don't like for me to make this public. I'm still going to make it public. because it's also bragging. It's just not the way to do it. We have done 1031s from the closing table. Okay, but that's not the way to do it.
Sure.
If you're closing and all of a sudden they mention 1031s, stop the closing. And there are times we've had a full conversation with the client, gotten the contract, gotten the title commitment, and gotten our exchange documents to the closing within an hour. But that's not, y'all would never do that because you're going to ask your clients ahead of time,
right,
what are your goals? Y'all aren't just looking for a commission. Let's do a sale. Yeah, let's sell it for this price. What are your goals? I know y'all are relationship based.
Sure.
So you're going to bring this up all the time. But I want people to know you got to reach a 1031 person by the time you close. If you are at a closing and it's brought up, stop the closing and reach a 1031 expert. And I can share my information, but you're counting on reaching somebody and them not doing what we're doing today, it being available, and then our staff being available and all that kind of stuff. The other day, somebody called me, and it was at the closing table. I have a lot of stories where we've gotten it done. This one was, we were about to jump up because they said they wanted to do a 1031, but I still need to have a conversation because in my conversation, I was able to figure out it didn't even qualify.
Right.
We were all about to go and do all this work.
Right.
And, you still got to make sure it qualifies. It was actually their primary residence, but they thought you needed to do a 1031 on a primary residence.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't think that anybody in any role like the one that you play or the one that we play or title companies and other attorneys, I don't think anybody's immune from having to scramble.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've all had to do that, and it's part of what makes it interesting business.
Yeah.
But certainly you'd like to be ahead of that game rather than dealing with it, being behind it.
Yeah.
What is the... You may have asked this. You may have answered this earlier. What is legally required in order to facilitate a 1031 exchange? I mean, you are, in other words, we are self-storage brokers who specialize in this. We believe there's value, that our role provides. But a real estate owner is by no means legally obligated to use us. He can sell directly to somebody else if he wants to.
Right.
How does that differ from a 1031 exchange?
To do a 1031, it's legally required that you have exchange documents there. Otherwise, you have receipt, and that kills an exchange. So you're legally required to hire a qualified intermediary. The qualified intermediary has to be someone that you don't have any other relationship with. You hire what's called a qualified intermediary, and they have to be independent. So you have to have exchange documents there by someone that's not your relative or agent. That's what's legally required to do it.
And that is,
and that's what we do. That's what we do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Reverse 1031 exchanges. What are they? Who do they apply to? How do we explain them?
Okay, so the term reverse exchange is another, I would call, it's not a misnomer because it's a real word. It's misleading. It's misleading. Sort of in a bad way. Like kind is misleading in a great way because it's a lot broader.
Yeah, right.
Exchange is misleading in a great way because you don't actually have to find somebody to swap with.
Right.
What's misleading about the term reverse is I'll have people call me. They say they're selling something. They just got an offer on something they've held a long time. What they're going to sell qualifies. And so let's say I know this, people can watch this at any time of the year, but let's say I get this call on November 17th and somebody says, I just accepted an offer to sell something and they're going to close next month. Well, I've just bought something in July and I heard you could do a reverse, so I want to do a reverse. That is absolutely what the term reverse could mean. It's very reasonable to ask me that question because the tax code says you can do a reverse exchange. A better term is parking arrangement, although we use the word because it's just the common way, as y'all know, you use the word reverse exchange. Parking arrangement is more descriptive. That is, what you want to do on a regular exchange, even though you have 45 more days after you close your sale, and to identify what you want to buy and 180 to close. As y'all know, and have told your clients a million times, it doesn't mean you wait till the closing of the sale to start looking. So you're allowed to tie something up. You're even allowed to put down earnest money, as y'all know, and have something ready to go. We've had people close the sale and purchase it the same day because they have it all ready to go. So it's ideal to have something to buy under contract with a contingency or an option and have it ready to go. And then you buy it right after you close your sale. A reverse is where you've done such a great job finding something to buy and you're so in love with it, and this factor, it puts you into a reverse situation. That person that owns that property is not going to wait for you to close your sale. Your option is a reverse, but what that means is since you still own the property that you're going to sell, reverse means you put up the money with us and you put title in our name. And once you put title in, and you're allowed to do that under the tax code. So you get it off the market, we hold it, you park it with us, and once you park that, you've got 180 days to sell your property, and then at the end of 180, we transfer the property to you. If you don't sell your property within 180 days, you take over ownership of this property. It's not a taxable event because you didn't sell anything, but now you own both properties, and you have to take over this property. And a regular exchange we can do in a couple of days. Reverses, from the time we first start talking to them, there's so much involved. We really need a good 4 weeks. I'm not saying it always takes us 4 weeks once we're ready, but realistically, it's going to take a while. It almost always takes a week to 2 weeks, and sometimes even longer before I have all the information I need to set up a reverse, and then it can take another 3 weeks. So those require more advanced planning, and the fees that just about every good company charges is getting closer to 10 grand instead of 1 grand to 250.
Right. Well, yeah. It speaks to why having somebody who specializes is very important. That's precisely what we do here in our world, and that's precisely why we wanted to invite you in. It's because you conduct your business in that same fashion and giving our viewers an understanding of what to expect, some of the roadblocks that may exist, some of the opportunities that perhaps they haven't thought of before. It can require the presence of somebody who's been down that road for years. They've done it over and over and over, because getting good counsel is not something that is easily done when you're doing it for the first time by yourself. Right. Right. Exactly. So that's this has been valuable for us. I think that this is a good opportunity to learn something about what's happening in today's marketplace. We thank you for coming so much.
You bet. My pleasure. Thank you. Okay.
I do have another question. Yeah, we didn't ask about seller financing.
Oh, duh. Oh my gosh! Yeah, and improvement exchanges.
Yep.
There you go. And then for our contact data, is that something we can just add later?
We're going to put it on it.
We'll just keep going. I can move this to the end.
I don't want to do my contact information verbally necessarily, unless I can change it.
We'll put it
on the end.
We'll put it graphically at the bottom.
Right.
Yeah. That's fine.
And then the other thing is this.
Thanks.
Yeah, seller financing and improvement exchanges.
Improvement exchanges meaning
that's more of a segue. It's a segue from reverses, so it'd be good to do improvements.
So improvements as opposed to real property.
Well, no. How does people say I'm going to buy this property, but after I buy it, I'm going to add a bunch of improvements. Can I include that?
Got it.
Can I include that?
Yeah.
What about? I had an example where a guy sold a storage facility and he bought an equipment rental company. And then he told me he was able to use his 1031 proceeds to buy more equipment for the equipment rental company.
It's just real estate. But the write-offs on that stuff are so generous that he just wrote it off. I mean, his CPA wrote it off against really his income.
Oh, okay.
It's not. It's
Wouldn't have.
People
Well, we won't include that one. I don't want to throw old Tim under the bus.
I had a fella named Tim. He lives at 123.
Yeah.
His EIN number.
Now, before 2017, you could actually do it with personal property, but it had to be equipment for equipment.
Okay. That is one thing. I think it was before 2017, but it wasn't.
That's one thing that Paul Ryan did take away.
Dang it, Paul.
Yeah.
Let's get seller. That's a good.
That's a big. I can't believe we also.
I was thinking about it, so don't worry.
Okay. Oh.
So one big trend that we're seeing in the investment sales world, particularly in self-storage transactions, is seller financing. So how does that come into play when we're talking about owner financing in a potential 1031 exchange?
Usually a seller financing means there is no 1031. Not always. There's actually like 4 options. It's just that in about 90% of the cases, none of those options work. It's just that if the amount of the note is fairly small to where paying taxes on that note still allows them to defer the rest of the gain, that's one thing. So they can either take the note and pay taxes over time, and their CPA can explain and get with a 1031 company and get some stuff in writing. I can send it to you. If the note is fairly small, then even if you pay taxes on the note, if your gain is quite a bit bigger than that, you're still deferring some gain. So you're deferring some gain through a 1031, and you're deferring some of the gain through that note. It's just that with a 1031, you can defer it forever.
Right.
With a note, you're going to defer it only until you ultimately get all your payments. But typically, what I've seen, when it's seller financing, that note is so large that if the note you're taking is more than your gain would have been, there's nothing left to defer. And so you're going to pay taxes under Section 453, which is fine. A lot of people, as you know, love that. But the way you can 1031 it is if you are a cash-rich person that can replace that note with your own money, or if you can get someone else to replace it. But I haven't seen anybody say that was attractive because they can't sell the note for enough to make it worth it.
Right.
I had one case again where, so we hold the note, we hold the money, and we hold the note if you want to try to do something with the note. And by do something with the note, either the seller replaces it with their money, a note buyer replaces it, or your buyer gets it financed but through someone else within 180 days and before you buy your next property. And like I said, the last one was, if you find something you want to buy and that seller will take an assignment of that note, then you spent that note just like you spent the cash.
Right.
So one type of potential exchange I wanted to ask you about is buying land that you could potentially build self-storage on, or any other kind of commercial property. Or what if you were to buy a existing self-storage facility and then expand that facility? Could you use 1031 exchange proceeds in either example to build more property?
Absolutely. There's a great, I put great in quotes, there's a great solution. There is a solution in the code. It's only great when it works, and there are a lot of limitations that make them fairly rare. But of course, they're hugely beneficial when it works. It's even more feasible typically outside the city limits where you have less regulations. But because people come to us all the time and they say, well, I'm selling something for $5 million, and but I hadn't found another $5 million building I want. I found $1 million piece of property that I want to add a $4 million improvement on. And so it sounds like that could match up. And one big negative, like not buying into partnerships, is you can't count anything you spend on a property after you buy it with a 1031. You may have other ways to write it off, depreciation, but if you sell something in a 1031, say for $5 million, and you buy a property, if you go ahead and buy it in your name, that's all you bought. If you only spent $1 million on the land, that's it. You pay taxes on $4 million if your gain was that much. But in the relatively rare case where you can have everything ready to go to build a hotel or maybe expand many warehouses, that's probably easier. Especially, I guess some of them are a little more out of the city limits. But so if you can be ready to go, it's another parking arrangement like a reverse. Because again, you can't count any improvements you make after you buy it. So what does that mean? That means when you sell your property and we hold your $5 million, we have to have already formed a new LLC that we own, and we will spend $1 million of your property, of your money on this property, and we'll lease it to you. And if you're ready to go and you start building improvements, then by day 180, we can transfer this to you, and you get to count the cost of the land and the cost of improvements that you made in 180. So it only works when people can do enough in 180 to make it worth it. The great news is your project doesn't have to be finished. You don't have to have a certificate of occupancy.
That's the real, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you can count what you got
Right.
done.
Okay.
And you can't prepay for stuff. You can't prepay for stuff. I have a
Gotcha.
wink in my eye because I don't know. Anyway,
Well,
legally,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Sure.
it's the rules are it's only for what has been spent and done.
right, got
Gotcha.
it, got it.
Gotcha.
But you can, even on the rules, the soft cost of any kind of legal fees and plans, architectural.
It doesn't just have to be hard costs.
Yeah,
It's
the cost
everything.
of the improvements. Yeah,
Okay.
But you can't count bricks that were just delivered, I think, but not installed, and definitely if it hadn't been delivered. And then you can get into some nuances. That's their CPA, up to their CPA. But we can tell them the rules. Not only can you can count what you spent, but not more. But also, believe it or not, within 45 days after closing your sale, you actually have to identify as good as you can the amount of improvements you're going to get done. Now, I haven't seen them be butts about that. You have to wind up buying significantly the same as you wrote down. So to set these up, we need all the property descriptions, we need the contracts, we need the closers' names, but also we need a description of the improvements that you think you're going to get done in 180 days and about what they're going to cost.
Okay.
If you're within any kind of reasonable accuracy, you're fine.
So to accomplish a 1031 exchange in general, you have to kind of have your act together. If you want to do a reverse exchange or an improvement exchange, you really got to have your act together, right?
Exactly.
Because it's just a lot more work. It's a lot more difficult to pull off,
Right.
but the reality is that there are options. And I think what we've discussed here today is very reflective of the fact that in your world, there are a ton of options.
Mm-hmm.
Just requires some investigation on the front end, developing a relationship with somebody who does it specifically, not just a jack of all trades, master of none type of thing, which is precisely why Danny and I do what we do and what the reason why we had you here. So I think this would be very beneficial to our clients, and thank you for coming.
You bet. Thank y'all very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you.